Hey, you are listening to MedikaTalks, which brings to you all the exclusive healthcare industry news, views, and opinions from across the world.
Hello listeners, I'm Urvashi. Today we will discuss different types of sutures and its materials. Hello doctor, welcome to our podcast for patients, caregivers and healthcare professionals at MedikaTalks.
Surgical suture materials are used in the closure of most wound types. The ideal suture should allow the healing tissue to recover sufficiently to keep the wound close together once they are removed or absorbed. The time it takes for a tissue to no longer require support from sutures will vary depending on the tissue type. Healing is in days for muscle or subcutaneous tissue or skin. It is healing takes weeks to months for fascia or tendon and months for nerve or vascular prosthesis. The application of a suture essentially involves the use of a needle along with an attached thread. Today, doctors have access to a wide variety and type of surgical sutures of different size, shapes, and thread materials. Most people often confuse the word suture with stitches. However, a suture is simply the name of the medical device used by the doctor to repair the wound, whereas stitching is merely the technique the doctor uses to close the wound.
Doctor, can you tell us what sutures are?
Broadly, sutures can be classified into absorbable and non absorbable materials. They can be further subclassified into synthetic or natural sutures and monofilament or multifilament sutures. The enzymes in the body tissues can naturally digest the absorbable suture, which is why doctors do not need to remove them. However, the non absorbable sutures are usually removed after a few days of the surgery. They may also be left in the body permanently based on the type of surgery that the patient has undergone. The ideal suture is the smallest possible to produce uniform tensile strength securely to hold the wound for the required time of healing, then be absorbed. It should be predictable, easy to handle, produce minimal reaction, and not securely. A suture is also classified based on the actual structure of the suture material. For instance, a monofilament suture comprises a single thread that allows the suture to pass through the tissue easily. In contrast, a braided suture consists of many small threads which are braided together. While it is more secure, a braided suture also increases the potential for infections. Finally, sutures are also categorized as being made of synthetic or natural material, but it does not make much difference since all suture materials are sterilized. Let's talk more about the types now. Absorbable sutures are broken down by the body via enzymatic reactions or hydrolysis. The time in which this absorption takes place varies between material, location of suture, and patient factors. Absorbable sutures are commonly used for deep tissues and tissues that heal rapidly. As a result, they may be used in small bowel anastomies, structuring in the urinary or biliary tracts, or tying of small vessels near the skin. Non absorbable sutures are used to provide long term tissue support, remaining walled off by the body's inflammatory process until removed manually if required. These uses include for tissues that heal slowly, such as fascia or tendons, closure of abdominal wall, or vascular anastomies. Suture materials can be further categorized by their raw origin. Natural, that is made of natural fibers such as silk or catgut. They are less frequently used as they tend to provoke a greater tissue reaction. However, suturing silk is still utilized regularly in the securing of surgical drains. Synthetic that comprises of man-made materials such as PDS or nylon, they tend to be more predictable than the natural sutures, particularly in their loss of tensile strength and absorption. Monofilament versus multifilament is type of suture material that can also be subclassified by its structure. Monofilament structure is a single-stranded filament structure such as nylon, PDS, or porcelain. They have a lower infection risk but also have poor knot security and ease of handling. Multifilament suture is made of several filaments that are twisted together. Example, braided silk or vicryl. They handle easier and hold their shape for good knot security, yet can harbor infections.
Are there any variations of sizes in the suture?
The diameter of the suture will affect its handling properties and tensile strength. The larger the size ascribed to the suture, the smaller the diameter is. For example, a 7-0 suture is smaller than a 4-0 suture. When choosing suture size, the smallest size possible should be chosen, taking into account the natural strength of the tissue.
What are the types of suture needles?
Doctors use suture needles to place the sutures with the tissue. The needle carries the material through the wound with minimal residual trauma. Typically, these needles are rigid enough and can resist distortion, but also flexible enough such that they can bend before breaking. Depending on the wound being repaired, the doctor also uses a slim needle that can minimize trauma. At the same time, it should be sharp enough so that it can penetrate the tissue with negligible penetration. The needle should be stable so that it permits accurate placement. Suture needles are usually made of stainless steel and are composed of the following elements: the needle point, which gently pierces the tissue, starting at the body's maximal point and running at the needle's end. It can be sharp or blunt. The blunt suture needles are designed to penetrate into muscle and fascia. It can be used to reduce the risk of potential bloodborne infections arising due to needle stick injuries. The sharp suture needles pierces and spreads the tissue with little cutting and is used in areas in which leakage needs to be prevented. The shape of the different type of suture needles varies as per the curvature and is described in the proportion to the circle completed. The most used curvatures include 1/4, half, 3/8, 5/8, etc.
Doctor, what message would you like to give to our listeners?
There are several factors to be considered while choosing the type of sutures and materials, which include the patient's personal preference, the tissue type, and the infection risk. So, the practitioner needs to choose the decision wisely.
Thank you, Doctor, for being a part of MedikaTalks and sharing your insights. We are hopeful that this informative talk will be of great use to our listeners.
Hey listeners, I hope this podcast was beneficial for you. Don't forget to stay tuned with us for our next podcast session, where we bring to you all kinds of healthcare industry news, views and opinions from around the world.